March 14th, 1864. Burke County, Georgia. The war had already torn the South to pieces, but Thornhill Estate still stood like a white lie against the red clay columns proud, cotton fields silent under cold spring rain. Then the 34th Infantry arrived. Union soldiers' boots heavy with Georgia mud, rifles still warm from the last fights, mashed the iron basement doors with crowbars and raw anger. What spilled out made men who had buried their own brothers at Gettysburg turn away and vomit into the dirt. 20-3. Children ages 4 to 13, locked in near darkness on thin straw pallets. Clean cotton shifts, no toys, no blankets. Beyond, rags. But every child shared the same impossible face. High cheekbones, pale green eyes, open hair streaked gold like fire trapped in copper. They looked like dolls from the same mold. They looked like brothers and sisters. They looked like her. The eldest, a girl of 13, Namadolina, stepped forward. When the last chain broke, she did not cry. She did not. She looked straight at the captain and said, voice steady as stone, "Mistress says we are her legacy. We cannot leave, because we are her blood." Captain Elias Hawthorne felt the world tilt. He had cut down boys younger than these children, he had watched friends bleed out at Gettysburg. But this quiet gallery of living mirrors was something the war had never shown him. He knelt. "What is your name?" "Eleanor Thornhill," she answered. Then she pointed to each child in turn, naming them like a roll call from a nightmare. Jonathan Thornhill, Abigail Thornhill, Margaret Thornhill, Samuel Thornhill, William Thornhill, Henry Thornhill, Caroline Thornhill. 23 names, every single one ending in Thornhill. Hawthorne's voice cracked. Who is your mother? Kate D. Nu. Thornhill? Eleanor's green eyes never blinked. She made us. She keeps us here, so we stay hers forever. Behind her, a 4-year-old girl clutched a rag doll, with auburn yarn hair. Same eyes, same cheekbones, same gold streak hid calves. Hawthorne stood slowly. The basement Wascleyan stone walls, iron rings bolted deep, one high window letting in gray light. No chains on the children now. But the rings were new, the locks were new. He turned to his sergeant. Blankets. Food. Water. Now. Then he wrote in his report that Nime marked confidential and buried in archives for 157 years. March 14, 1864, Thornhill Estate. Discovered 23 children imprisoned in basement. All bear identical features. High cheekbones, pale green eyes, auburn hair, with gold streaks. Eldest claims they are biological offspring of Mistress Catherine Thornhill, via force breeding with enslaved men. Children raised in main house, until recently confined below. Mistress absent fled south, days prior. Recommend full investigation. This is abomination. Local histories of Burke County erase Thornhill Estate. No marker. No mention, as if the columns, the fields, the woman ever existed. But they did. And what Catherine Thornhill built between 1847 and 1864 was not a plantation. It was a dynasty of blood. February 1847. The coldest winter Burke County had seen in 20 years. Catherine Danforth. Thornhill buried her under live oaks heavy with Spanish moss. She was 28. Still beautiful, still lethal. Jonathan had gambled the estate into ruin. Debts strangling. The books, fields were tired. 31 enslaved people remained barely enough to keep the place breathing. Catherine stood at the grave in black silk. No tears. no grief, only calculation. That night, alone in the study, she opened a fresh ledger. She wrote one line at the top. Cultivation plan. Thornhill Estate. Minus 1847. Then she began to draw charts. Charts that looked like livestock breed, but the subjects were human. She was young enough to bear children. She was ruthless enough to use enslaved men as rootstock. She was smart enough to see the long game, create a workforce genetically tied to her children, who were literally her blood, who could never be sold away, who would never run because of Plantation was their inheritance. She called them seedlings. Men were rootstock. Pregnancies were plantings, and she begun. First planting, Isaac, 24, strong, steady, born in the plantation. Summoned after dark. No choice, no refusal. 3 weeks later, second planting. Then, third, fourth. By April, Catherine knew she was pregnant. She recorded it like a crop report. First, cultivation, successful. Anticipatorivist, December 1847. Her stepson, Richard, sullen, bookish, suspected something was wrong by May. His stepmother stopped writing, took meals in her room, dismissed servants. Her belly began to show. But the timeline didn't add up. Jonathan had been dying in January fever, barely conscious. No possibility of conception then. Richard did the math. He confronted her in Thepperlore one evening. "You're carrying a child," he said. Catherine looked up from embroidery. "Yes. Father's. Of course." Richard stared. "You lie." Catherine set the needle down. "Kefa, Richard, accusations like that could ruin you." He left shaking, but he kept watching. He saw Isaac summoned again and again. Dark. He saw Catherine's body change. He saw her write in a locked journal every night. And one August afternoon, while Catherine was in town, Richard picked the lock on her desk. Inside. The ledger. Cultivation plan. Charts. Names. Dates. Pairings. Planned. Decades ahead. He read until a V. OMI. Then he copied Page's hands trembling, translating her cipher into plain English. This was proof. This was damnation. But when Catherine returned that evening, she looked at him across the dinner table and said softly, "Richard, have you been in my study?" He lied. "No, ma'am." She smiled thin, cold. "Good. Because family loyalty is everything. Without it, we're simply animals, tearing at each other." The threat hung. Richard burned his copies that night, but he never stopped watching. And Catherine never stopped planting. By December 1847, she gave birth to a son, named him Jonathan. Claimed premature, no one counted backward far enough. She held him in candlelight and whispered, "You are my legacy. You will never leave me, because you are my blood." Outside, the Georgia wind moved through the oak stot. And in the quarters, a woman named Ruth, who had already seen too much, began to whisper, "She's not building a family. She's building a..." February 1847 turned into March, and the cold lingered over Burke County like a grudge. Thornhill Estate's fields were still brown and brittle, but inside the main house, Catherine Thornhill's plan had already taken root. She kept the ledger locked in the bottom drawer of Jonathan's old desk. Every night after the house slaves retired, she lit a single candle and wrote in her cipher, "Rootstock 1, Isaac, strength, steady temperament, good teeth, no visible defects. First, planting March 3rd. Second March, 20. Third, April 1st. Weather, clear. Anticipate harvest. December. She did not write about the nights Isaac was summoned after dark. She did not write about the way he looked at the floor when she gave the order. She did not write about the silence that followed when A left. She only wrote results. By late April, she knew she was pregnant. She recorded it the same way she might note a successful cotton stand. First cultivation confirmed. Seedling viable. Expected harvest, December 1847. Her stepson Richard watched her from the Igisoff rooms. He was 16, tall for his age, but then too many hours bent over books instead of fieldwork. He had always been quiet. Now he was watchful. He noticed she stopped riding the perimeter. She took meals in her room. She dismissed the house servant who usually attended her. Her belly began to show under the black silk. But the timeline did not add up. Jonathan had been dying in January fever, barely conscious, coughing blood into Richard had sat with him many nights. There had been no possibility of intimacy. Richard did the math. He confronted her own evening in the parlor, while she embroidered by lamplight. "You're carrying a child," he said. Catherine did not look up. "Yes." "Fathers." "Of course." Richard stepped closer. He was dying in January. Bedridden. You know he was. Catherine set the needle down. "Careful, Richard. Accusations like that could ruin you." He stared at her. "You're lying." She smiled, thin, cold. The smile she used "And if I am?" "What then? You'll run to your grandfather in Augusta. To the lawyer. To the sheriff. They'll believe a grieving widow over a resentful boy with a history of sullenness and imagination." Rich's hands shook. "You're a monster. I'm a survivor," she corrected. "And you would wise to remember which side of the ledger you're on." He left the room, but he kept watching. He saw Isaac summoned again, and again dark. Always when the overseer Virgil Kane was away in town or accompanied elsewhere. He saw Catherine's body change. He saw her write in the locked journal every night. And one August afternoon, while Catherine was in Waynesboro, meeting with her lawyer, Richard picked the lock on her desk. Inside, the ledger, cultivation plan, charts, names, dates, pairings, planned decades ahead. Rootstock. 2. Thomas. Strong back. Good planting May 1848. Anticipate harvest February 1849. Rootstock 3, Samueled, intelligent features, steady. Planting July 1848. Anticipate harvest April 1849. He read until bile rose in his throat. Then he copied Podge's hands trembling, translating her cipher into plain English. This was proof. This was damnation. But when Catherine returned that evening, she looked at him across the dinner table and said softly, "Richard, have you been in my study?" He lied. "No, ma'am." She smiled again. "Good. Because family loyalty is everything. Without it, we're simply animals tearing at each other." The thread hung. Richard burned his copies that night in the fireplace of his room. The pages curled and blackened, but the words stayed burned into his mind. And Catherine never stopped planting. By December 1847, she gave birth to a son. Now, Madame Jonathan claimed he was premature. No one counted backward far enough to question it. She held him in candlelight and whispered, "You are my legacy. You will never leave me, because you are my blood." Outside, the Georgia wind moved through the oaks. In the quarters, Ruth, who had already seen too much, began to whisper to others in the dark, "She's not building a family. She's building a..." And the whispers spread. Spring 1848 brought the second planting. Catherine selected Thomas Marietto, Hannah, in the quarters. Strong, compliant, under threat. She summoned him after dark. Hannah waited in their cabin, pregnant with their first child, pretending not to know where her husband went. Thomas returned before dawn. He never spoke of what happened in the main house. Hannah never asked. 9 months later, Catherine gave birth to a daughter, named her Eleanor, claimed premature again. She held Eleanor in the same candlelight and whispered the same words. In the quarters, Hannah gave birth to a stillborn son. She wept alone. Ruth found her the next morning, held her while shook. They're taking everything, Hannah whispered. Even what's ours. Ruth said nothing, but her eyes burned. By 1850, Catherine had 3 children of her own, Jonathan, Eleanor, Abigail, all raised in the main house, all Toret and Raitaliga. Dangerous, but necessary for her plan. They wore clean clothes, ate better food, called her mother without knowing what the word truly meant. She kept the ledger updated. Seedling 3, Abigail. Good health. Compriantem Pamu. Planting July 1849. Harvest April 1850. She began planning the next phase. The children would need to reach maturity. Thenthe would be paired. Then their children would be paired. Within 30 years, Thornhill would have a workforce of 50 or more all. Thornhill by blood, all bound forever. She called the room where she kept the journals and hair vials the heritage room, windowless, locked, a shrine to her vision. She spent hours there, drawing future familiaries. Jonathan with Rachel, daughter of field hand Elijah, Eleanor with Marcus Isaac's son, to be born 1862, Abigail with Peter Samuel's nephew. Lines connected names with notations. Strong expected. Good teeth anticipated. Compliant. Temperament traject. It looked like a breeder's chart for seahorses. But the names were human. Richard watched from the shadows. He was a teen now, weaker every day. Headaches. Stomach pains. Fatigue. Good. That left him bedridden. For hours. He knew what it was. Arsenic. Slow. Subtle. Disguised as consumption. Catherine brought him soup herself, adjusted his pillows, spoke softly about how the fever affected the mind. You're imagining things, darling, she said all night, stroking his hair. The illness makes you see monsters where there are none. Richard looked at her. I see. You, clearly. She smiled. That's the fever talking. He died December 3rd, 1847. 3 weeks before his 17th birthday. Dr. Pritchard from Waynesboro. Catherine wept decorously at the funeral. Wore black for a full year. 4 days after Richard's burial, she gave birth to Eleanor. She held the girl in candlelight and whispered, You are my legacy. You will never leave me. Because you are my blood. In the quarters? Ruth whispered to Hannah. She killed the boy. She'll kill anyone, Hannah said. Nothing. She had already lost too much. But the whispers spread. And in the main house, Catherine kept writing, kept planning, kept planting. The cage was growing. And no one outside Thornhill Estate had any idea what was being cultivated inside its walls. By 1856, Thornhill Estate looked prosperous from the road. Cotton yields climbed year after year. The quarters were clean, the workers fed, the main house freshly whitewashed. Neighbors in Waynesboro spoke of Catherine Thornhill as a model widow, disciplined, turning a failing inheritance into quiet success. No one saw the heritage room. It occupied a windowless corner of the east wing, a space that had once been a storage closet. Catherine had the door reinforced with iron bands. She kept the only key on a thin chain around her neck, even while sleeping. Inside, oil lamps burned low. Shelves lined the walls, 3 leather-bound journals by 80, each page filled with her ciphered notes. Small glass vials stood in neat rows, each containing a lock of auburn hair labeled by name, and birth date. Jonathan, December 1847, Eleanor APR, 1849. Abigail, FEB, 1850. Margaretto, 9851. Samuel, July, 1853. William, Mar, 1854. Henry, October, 1855. Caroline, June, 1856. On the central table lay large sheets of paper covered in ink. Family trees and not real genealogy, but Catherine's planned future dot lines connected names with notations. Jonathan plus Rachel, Elijah's daughter. Strong constitution, expected 1865. 80 Noah, Pradasa, Marxa, Isaacsa. Isto. Birth 1862. Intelligent temperament. Projected Abigail, plus Peter Samuel's nephew, Comprianto. Good teeth, anticipated. It looked like a breeder's chart for thoroughbreds. Except the names were children sleeping in the rooms above. Catherine spent hours here alone. She measured the children monthly height, weight, head circumference, eye color, intensity, hair, sheen. She noted temperament. Jonathan, serious, obedient, slow to anger. Eleanor, observant, questioning. Potential difficulty. Abigail, compliant, affectionate, ideal. She wrote in the journals with the same detached precision she used for cotton yields. Seedling, 7. Caroline, excellent vigor, pale green eyes dominant. Planting with rootstock, 5. Thomas, scheduled 1868. Anticipate harvest May 1869. She was 37 now. Still capable of bearing more. Still planning decades ahead. But the children were growing up. Jonathan was 9 tall for his age. Quiet, already reading the books Catherine kept in the parlor. He asked few questions. He accepted her explanations without challenge. He believed he was an orphan she had taken in out of charity. Eleanor was 7. She watched everything. She noticed how the other enslaved children in the quarters looked at her, mixed with pity. She noticed how Catherine measured them like livestock. She noticed the locked door to the heritage room. One afternoon in late spring, 1856, while Catherine was in Waynesboro, meeting her lawyer, Eleanor slipped into the study. She had watched her mother hide the key under a loose floorboard near the fireplace. She pried it up with a letter opener. The heritage room smelled of old paper, lamp oil, and something faintly metallic-like, preserved. Hair and ink. Eleanor lit a lamp. She saw the shelves, the vials, the charts. She saw her own name, connected by ink lines to a boy not yet born. She read the notations under her entry. Eleanor, observant, high intelligence, slight resistance noted. Pairing with Marcus Isaac's son, 1875 to 1880. Expected outcome. Strong, intelligent offspring, suitable for house or specialized labor. Her hand shook. She opened the nearest journal. Decoded the cipher the way she had seen Catherine do it. Substitution. Easy, once she knew the pattern. First, planting Isaac, March 8, in 47. Successful. Harvest Jonathan, December 80, 47. Second planting, Thomas, May, 1848. Successful. Harvest Eleanor, APR, 8049. She read until nausea forced her to stop. She was not an orphan. She was Catherine's daughter. Thomas was her father. And Catherine planned to force her to have children with a boy who did not yet exist. She closed the journal, replaced it, locked the door, slid the key back under the floorboard. That night she told no one, but she began to watch Catherine differently, not with fear, with calculation. Abigail was 6. Margaret, 5. They followed Eleanor's lead without question. They, too, had noticed the measuring. The locked room. The way Catherine looked at them, not like a mother, but like a farmer inspecting crops. In the quarters, the whispers grew louder. Ruth had died in 1853 fever, they said. But everyone knew she had never recovered from the forced abortion in 1851. She had walked into the Savannah River one night and never come out. Hannah had lost her stillborn son. She never conceived again. She never spoke to her, Thomas, about the nights he was summoned to the main house. But others talked. Hope, 42, mother of 3, spoke to Eleanor one afternoon when the girl wandered near the quarters. "You look just like her," Hope said quietly, "but your eyes got questions in them." "That's good." Eleanor looked up. "What do you mean?" Hope glanced around. "Your mama thinks she's building something special. Thinks she's making family. But all she's making is people who hate her in ways she can't understand." Eleanor's voice was small. "She's my mother." Hope knelt. "She's your blood." "That don't make her your mama." Eleanor stared at the ground. Hope continued. "War's coming. Yankees coming. Freedom coming. All you gotta do is survive until then." Eleanor nodded once. That night she told Abigail and Margaret what she had read in the Heritage Room. Abigail cried. Margaret went quiet. Jonathan refused to believe it. "She gave us a better life," he insisted. "We could have been in the fields. She kept us together." Eleanor looked at him. "She kept us for breeding. Jonathan, like horses." Jonathan shook his head. "You're wrong." But Eleanor saw the doubt flicker in his eyes. By 1859, Catherine's children were reaching adolescence. Jonathan was 11. Eleanor, 10. Abigail, 9. She began preparing them for the next phase. She spoke to them in the Heritage Room, now unlocked for them as a family secret. "You are special," she told them. "You are Thornhill. This land is in your blood. One day you will help make more Thornhills. Stronger, better. Forever." Jonathan listened. Eleanor listened. Abigail listened. But Eleanor's mind was elsewhere, had begun slipping out at night short trips to the quarters. She spoke to Hope. Thomas. 2 others. She learned things Catherine had never told her. About Isaac. About Thomas. About the women who had died or been broken. She learned that her mother had killed Reach with poison in his food. She learned that Catherine planned to pair her with a boy not yet born. And she learned that the people in the quarters were waiting for the war to reach them, waiting for the moment they could end it themselves. In October 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected. South Carolina seceded in December. Georgia followed in January 1861. War came in April. Catherine paid little attention at first. She believed it would be short. She believed the Confederacy would win. But by 1863, the war had changed everything. Virgil Kane, the overseer, enlisted and died at Shiloh. Silas Kendricken, old man, took his place. Less brutal, less effective. News filtered through the slave networks. Union victories, emancipation. Rumors. Sherman, pushing south. Hope spoke to Eleanor in the woods one night. "Yankees coming," she whispered. "Freedom coming. All we gotta do is survive, Erina." "I know that though, but what if we don't wait?" Hope looked at her. "You're saying what I think you're saying?" Eleanor's voice was steady. "I'm saying we end it ourselves." The seed was planted, and the cage was beginning to crack. By 1859, the children were no longer children. Jonathan was 50, serious, already taller than most field hands. Eleanor was 14, sharp-eyed, quiet, always watching. Abigail, 13, gentle but quick to notice what others missed. Margaret, 12, fierce, in small ways, Samuel 11 book like Richard had been. William and Henry were 9 and 7, still playful, still innocent. Caroline was 3, too young to understand. Catherine had turned the East Wing storage closet into the heritage room, windowless. Iron banded door. Only she held the key on a thin chain she never removed. Even when bathing. Inside, oil lamps burned low. Shelves held her journal's 5 leather volumes now, pages thick with ciphered entries. Glass vials stood in perfect rows, locks of auburn hair labeled by name and birth date. On the central table lay her future maps, ink family trees with lines connecting names decades ahead. Jonathan plus Rachel, Elijah's daughter, strong constitution, expected 1865. Edinoa Pradasa Marticasa, Isaac Sasso, Isto. Births 1862, intelligent temperament projected Abigail, plus Peter Samuel's nephew, Compredi Anto. Good teeth anticipated. She spent hours here alone, measuring the children monthly height, weight, eye color depth, hair sheen. She noted temperament. Jonathan, obedient, slow to anger, ideal for continuation. Eleanor, observant, questioning, potential difficulty. Abigail, affectionate, ideal, she wrote, with the same cold precision. Seedling 8, Caroline, excellent vigor, pale green eyes dominant, planting with rootstock 6, Samuel scheduled 1870. Anticipate harvest, May 1871. She was 40 now, though capable, still planning 30 years ahead. But the children were waking up. Eleanor had cracked the cipher in 1856. She had read the journals, insecure pages, memorized, never stolen. She knew she was Catherine's daughter. She knew Thomas was her father. She knew Catherine planned to force her to have children with a boy not yet born. She told Abigail first. Abigail cried silently, then asked the only question that mattered. What do we do? Eleanor had no answer yet. But she began slipping to the quarters at night short trips. When Catherine slept or was in town, she spoke to Hope. To Tomas. To Anna. 2 others. She learned things Catherine never taught. Isaac, her half-siblings. Father sold south in 1849 once his purpose was served. Thomas, her own father, whipped when he tried to refuse. Catherine. Ruth dead by suicide after forced abortion. Hen conceived again after Thomas's nights in the main house. Eleanor learned that her mother had poisoned Richard slow arsenic in his food because he knew too much. She learned Catherine had killed to protect the plan. And she learned the quarters were waiting for the war. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected. South Carolina seceded. Georgia followed. War came in April 1861. Catherine believed it would be short. The Confederacy would win. Her plan would continue, uninterrupted. But by 1863, the war had changed everything. Virgil Kane enlisted and died at Shiloh. Silas Kendrickan, old man, took his place. Less brutal, less effective. News filtered through slave networks, Union victories, emancipation rumors. Sherman pushing south. Hope spoke to Eleanor in the woods one night in October 1863. Yankees coming, she whispered. Freedom coming. All we gotta do is survive. Eleanor's voice was steady. What if we don't wait? Hope looked at her, really looked. You saying what I think you saying. I'm saying we ended ourselves. The seed was planted. That night, Eleanor told Abigail, Margaret, Samuel, anyone old enough to understand. Jonathan refused. She gave us everything, he said. We'd be in the fields without her. She kept us together. Eleanor looked at him. She kept us forebreeding, like horses. Jonathan shook his head. You're wrong, but the doubt was there. In February 1864, Catherine summoned Jonathan to the Hérité room. He was 16, now nearly a man. She showed him the charts. "You're ready," she said. "Rachel is 16. Strong. Healthy. You'll marry her next month. You'll give me grandchildren. You'll continue the legacy." Jonathan stared at the ink line connecting his name to Rachel's. "Is she my sister?" he asked quietly. "Katerina Samidado." "No. Different rootstock. Different seedling. Perfect match." Jonathan looked at his mother. "I don't want this." Catherine's smile vanished. "You don't have a choice. This is what you were made for." Jonathan left the room. He found Eleanor in the nursery. "She wants me to marry Rachel," he whispered. "She wants grandchildren." Eleanor's face hardened. "We're not waiting for the Yankees anymore." Jonathan looked at her. "What are we going to do?" Eleanor looked at her sleeping babies, Carolyn and the youngest. "We're going to take the children. All of them. And we're going to end this." Jonathan shook his head. "She kill us." Eleanor smiled cold, like Catherine's. "Not if we kill her first." The words hung between them, and the cage cracked wider. In the quarters, Hope gathered the others. They spoke in whispers. "She's planning to breed the special children," Hope said. "She's starting with Jonathan and Rachel next month." "Thomas Eleanor's," Father spoke for the first time in years. "We can't let it happen." Hannah looked at him. "What do we do?" Hope looked toward the main house. "We wait for the right moment. And when it comes, we finish what she started." The moment came sooner than anyone expected. March 17th, 1864. Confederate cavalry unit passed through Burke County requisitioning supplies. They camped one night on Thornhill land. The soldiers spoke openly. Sherman was coming. The war was lost. Freedom was close. The enslaved population heard every word. Hope met Eleanor in the woods that night. "It's time," Hope said. Eleanor nodded. Tonight, they planned in whispers. The children would be taken from the main house. The journals and vials would be destroyed. Catherine would be confronted. And if she resisted, justice would be done. That night, Eleanor slipped into the heritage room while Catherine slept. She gathered the journals, the vials, the charts. She carried them. Outside a ward, the quarters. Catherine woke to the sound of footsteps. She followed, and the cage finally shattered. March 17th, 1864, Thornhill Estate. The moon was thin and sharp above the live oaks, and the air smelled of pine sap and coming rain. Catherine Thornhill woke to silence that felt wrong. The house was too quiet. No creak of floorboards. No soft breathing from the children's rooms. No wind moving the shutters. She rose, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and reached for the key on its chain around her neck. The heritage room door was ajar. She moved down the hallway barefoot, silent heart suddenly loud in her ears. The room was lit by a single oil lamp. Shelves were empty. The vials were gone. The journals were missing. The charts had been torn from the table and scattered like leaves. Footsteps behind her. She turned. Eleanor stood in the doorway. 14 years old, auburn hair loose, green eyes reflecting the lamp flame in her arms. The journals the vials the charts. Behind Eleanor, Jonathan Abigail, Margaret Samuel, William Henry, Caroline in Abigail's arms. 3 years old, sleepy, confused. All of them, all of Catherine's children, all looking at her with the same pale green eyes. Catherine's voice was steady. "What are you doing?" Eleanor stepped forward. "We read your journals." We know what you are. Catherine smiled thin, cold. I am your mother. I gave you life. I gave you everything. Jonathan spoke. You gave us chains. Catherine's eyes narrowed. You were never in chains. You lived in this house. You ate better food. You learned to read. You were safe. Eleanor's voice cracked. You planned to breed us. You planned to pair me with a boy not yet born. You planned to make us do to others what you did to our fathers. Catherine took a step closer. You don't understand. This land is dying. The war is coming. The Yankees will free the others. But you are Thornhill. You belong here. You are my legacy. Abigail whispered. We don't belong to you. Catherine looked at the mole of the man, saw something she had never seen before. Rejection. Fear. Not obedience. Rejection. She lunged for the journals in Eleanor's arms. Eleanor stepped back. Catherine's hand closed on empty air. She stumbled. The children scattered, some running toward the door, some deeper into the room. Catherine grabbed Eleanor's wrist. You will not destroy this, Eleanor. Twisted free. We already have. Catherine lunged again. This time, Jonathan caught her arm. He was 16 stronger than she expected. Let go, he said quietly. Catherine stared at him, her eldest son, her first harvest. You would betray me? You betrayed us first, Jonathan said. Catherine screamed a raw, furious sound and tore free. She ran. Out of the heritage room. Down the hallway. Through the parlor. Out the front door. Across the yard toward the quarters. The enslaved people were already awake, roused by the commotion, by the children running from the main house. Hope stood at the front of the quarters. Thomas beside her, and others. They saw Catherine running toward them, hair wild, shawl trailing, clutching nothing now but her own fury. Hope stepped forward. Catherine stopped 10 yards away. You think you can take 'em? Katerinushu Teddo. They are mine. They are. Thornhill. Hope's voice was calm. They never were yours. They were ours. And tonight, they choose. Catherine looked past Hope, saw Eleanor and Jonathan emerging from the house, the younger children with them. She looked back at Hope. You'll hang for this, she said. Hope smiled. Maybe, but not tonight. Catherine turned to run. Someone Tamos, maybe, or one of the men stepped into her path. She screamed again. The sound was cut short. What happened next depended on who you asked. Hope said. Catherine tripped in the dark and fell hard. Thomas said, someone pushed her. Hannah said she saw a rock come down. What was certain? Catherine Thornhill disappeared that night. Her body was never found. The journals were scattered in the mud. Outside the quarters, pages torn. Ink running in the rain. The vials were smashed. The charts burned. The next morning, Silas Kendrick searched the property. Dodd found nothing. He reported her missing to the sheriff. Sheriff came. Looked around. Concluded she had fled south in fear of advancing Union forces. Reasonable assumption. No one from the quarters spoke. Jonathan and Eleanor said nothing. The children said nothing. The official record stated only that Catherine Thornhill disappeared on March 17, 1864, and was never seen again. But everyone at Thornhill Estate knew she had been killed that night. Her body hidden somewhere on the 1,700 acres, perhaps in an old well, perhaps in the pine forest, perhaps simply buried deep. Her children, her biological offspring, her breeding experiments Her legacy had chosen to let her murderers go unpunished. Because they understood she had earned her fate. The war ended 14 months later. Sherman swept through Georgia 30 miles north, never touching Thornhill. Freedom came through occupation, the 13th Amendment, and the simple fact that the system could no longer hold at Thornhill. The transition was quiet. Most of the formerly enslaved left within weeks scattering to find sold-away family, to seek work in cities, to put distance between themselves and the place of their suffering. Hope stayed, helping organize those with nowhere else to go. Thomas stayed, finally able to speak to Eleanor as father to daughter. They had one conversation about Catherine. Then never spoke of her again. Eleanor stayed until 1867. Learned how to live free. Moved to Savannah. Married a carpenter named William. Foster. Never had children. Jonathan stayed longest, trying to work the land with a few freedmen who remained. But the cotton market collapsed. The soil was exhausted. The place's reputation spread by 1869. He abandoned Thornhill, drifted west, settled in Texas under a new name. Died in 1891. His few possessions included a small notebook where he had written over and over, "I did not choose this. I did not choose this. I did not choose this." Thornhill decayed rapidly. The main house burned in 1871, suspicious fire. People said the remaining structures fell into ruin. The land was seized for taxes and sold at auction in 1878 to a timber company that cleared the old oaks. But in 1871, a well driller on neighboring property broke through into an old cistern on former Thornhill land. 30 feet down, a skeleton. Woman, mid-30s or 40s. Scraps of 1860s dress. Corroded locket with 2 miniature portraits, a man and a young boy. Coroner ruled blunt force trauma to the skull. Buried in an unmarked county grave. Identified only as unknown female. Discovered former Thornhill property, 1871. But the black community in Burke County knew. The story lived in whispers in kitchens, in churches. In churches, in genealogy circles. Passed down in coded language that protected those who had been there that night. They knew Catherine Thornhill had been killed by the people she had enslaved and brutalized. They knew her body had been hidden in a deep well, or cistern. They knew justice of a kind had been done. In 1880, a dying man in Alabama confessed to a minister he had helped murder his former mistress in Georgia during the war. No name. No details. But the minister wrote it down. In 1902, Hope's granddaughter wrote a short memoir, The Night the Devil Mistress Disappeared, and Nobody Mourned Her. In 1923, a historian found Captain Reynolds' letter in courthouse basement archives. He read it, tried to verify, interviewed elderly residents. Most claimed to know nothing. One woman, 90th, great-granddaughter of someone from Thornhill only. Some things happened that needed to happen. Some people did things that needed doing. And that's all that needs to be said about it. The final mystery. The 23 children, freed, placed with freed families in Burke County and beyond. Some survived too. Adulthood. Some had children. Which means there are probably people alive today in Georgia or elsewhere who carry Catherine Thornhill's genetic legacy without knowing it. They might have pale green eyes, auburn hair streaked gold, high cheekbones. They will never know their ancestor built her empire on forced reproduction and genetic control. They will never know her. Body lies in an unmarked grave place there by the people she tormented. They will never know that the cage she built was finally broken not by war, not by law, but by the children she made and the people she tried to own. The site of Thornhill Estate is just fields and forest. Now, no historical marker, no books mention it in detail. The foundation is still visible, if you know where to look buried, underneath fallen time. The old well has long since collapsed and filled with earth. But the story persists, passed down through oral tradition in Burke County's black community, whispered in genealogy circles, referenced obliquely in papers about slavery and eugenics. It persists because it reveals something true and terrible about American history. Not just the brutality of slavery, ways human beings will rationalize, systematize, and sanctify cruelty when they hold absolute power. Catherine Thornhill convinced herself she was building something revolutionary. In reality, she intensified one of humanity's greatest evils. And the people she exploited, the people she bred, controlled, tormented, ultimately erased her, as thoroughly as she tried to erase their humanity. What do you think of this story? Do you believe the children ever forgave themselves for staying silent? Do you think Catherine's descendants carry her shadow without knowing it? Are there still secrets buried on that land in Burke County? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me your city or state while you're at it. I love seeing where these dark histories reach. If this tale of calculated evil, quiet resistance, and final erasure gripped you, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Of fear uncovers the corners of American history textbooks won't touch. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. The next story might be even darker. Until then, remember, the cruelest cages aren't made of iron. They're made of blood. And sometimes the only way to break them is to burn everything down. See you in the next one.